Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
I am Luffy, Partner System Online, One Piece, by Veltoria. Died in sleep, reborn as a child Luffy. No crew, no powers, just pain and a grindy system. To grow stronger, he must level up others. Each powered-up partner unlocks anime abilities. Fairy tale magic, soul blades, one-hit swords. With friendship, Hellgarp training, and a game UI, he's grinding his way to Pirate King in a darker One Piece world. Adios. Bittersweet.
At Makino's bar in Fuchsia Village, the atmosphere was lively and warm. Villagers raised their mugs and cheered loudly in celebration. "Thank you so much, Makino-san." Luffy beamed, his eyes sparkling like shooting stars as he held a glass of fresh milk. He looked at Makino with heartfelt gratitude. This welcome party for Luffy's return had been organized entirely by Makino herself. By the next morning, the entire village had heard that Luffy was back, taller, stronger, and he'd even brought a man back with him. Makino smiled sweetly, but after a moment, concern crept into her expression. "Luffy, that boy you brought back, he's been asleep for 3 days now. Are you sure he's okay?" Luffy winced at the thought of Zoro. His tone carried a mix of resignation and helplessness. "Don't worry, Makino-san. His body's just a bit different. He might be out cold for another 10 years or so." What? Makino gasped, covering her mouth in shock. Her cheeks were flushed from all the activity, making her look even more adorably flustered. "It's fine, really," Luffy waved her off with a smile. "No need to worry." He changed the subject. "Oh right, has my grandpa been back lately?" "Nope, haven't seen him," Makino replied with a chuckle. "What's the matter? Are you missing him already?" "As if." Luffy immediately denied. Bang. The bar door slammed open with a thunderous crash. The once joyful bar fell into sudden silence. "Sorry to interrupt." A gang of men stood in the doorway, completely blocking the entrance. Leading them was a towering figure, over 2 meters tall. His grayish-yellow face was wrinkled like bark, rough and cracked all over. He wore a filthy brown coat that hung loosely over his frame, and a curved blade, still stained with blood, hung at his waist. He strutted toward Luffy and Makino with heavy steps, planting one hand on the bar counter. His voice was hoarse and grating. "We're mountain bandits. But we're not here to rob today. Give us 10 barrels of booze." I'm so sorry." Makino stammered in panic. "We're all out of alcohol, everything's been drunk already." Despite running the bar, Makino was still just a young woman. And the sudden arrival of the bandits terrified her. "All gone. Then what are they drinking?" The bandit leader barked, glaring at the mugs on the villagers' tables. Makino trembled, unable to respond. "Hey, I'm in a really good mood today. Don't push your luck." The sudden outburst disrupted Luffy's calm, and he snapped impatiently. It had been so long, he'd almost forgotten these bandits even existed near Fuchsia Village. The bandit chief turned toward Luffy, his face contorting in fury. "What did you just say, you little?" But the moment his eyes met Luffy's, it was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over his head. A cold sweat broke out on his face. His rage dissolved into unease as a sliver of killing intent radiated from Luffy's eyes. The pressure alone was enough to freeze him in place. Damn it. Let's get out of here. Maybe another town will have what we want." Without another glance at Luffy, the bandit leader turned tail and fled, dragging his men with him. They had arrived with bravado, and left utterly humiliated. But the villagers weren't bothered in the slightest. Already drunk, they quickly returned to their carefree celebration. Laughter once again filled the bar. Only Makino remained worried. She leaned over and whispered to Luffy, "Luffy, you shouldn't speak to people like that. They're dangerous. Next time, please don't provoke them. It could end badly." But Luffy simply waved her off with a grin. "Relax, Makino-san. I've lost count of how many guys like that I've killed." He downed the last of his milk in one gulp. "Killing is wrong." Makino's tone suddenly turned stern. She didn't doubt Luffy's words, she knew he had the strength, and he never lied to her. But this was the first time Luffy had seen such a serious look on her face. Luffy. She reached out, cupping his cheeks in her hands and locking eyes with him. Promise me. No more killing, okay? With his cheeks squished between her palms and lips pouting, Luffy couldn't fight back. Defeated, he muttered, fine, fine. I promise, now please let go, Makino-san. I knew it. Luffy's always such a good boy. Satisfied with his answer, she playfully rubbed his cheeks one more time before reluctantly letting go. As she looked at the now grown Luffy, a touch of sadness flickered in her eyes. Soon, I might not be able to pinch his cheeks like this anymore. The next morning, Luffy was still sound asleep. Outside, a commotion was stirring. Luffy! Luffy! A villager burst into the bar, shouting frantically. The urgency in his voice jolted Luffy awake. He quickly got dressed and rushed out. The moment the villager saw him, he grabbed Luffy's arm without a word and dragged him through the streets. It's bad. Something terrible's happened. He didn't explain anything else. They arrived at one of the village's main roads. Luffy stopped in his tracks, and his expression changed instantly. His face darkened with fury. Rage burst from his eyes like a volcano erupting. A wagon loaded with barrels of wine had overturned on the road. Several barrels had burst open, spilling liquor across the ground. The area was surrounded by over 20 mountain bandits. The village chief was on his knees, bowing repeatedly, begging. Nearby, a few villagers lay unconscious. One man had been shot in the stomach, blood pooling around him. Makino was being held captive. Her face was swollen, bruised, and bleeding from both her mouth and nose. Her eyes were dazed and unfocused. The bandit leader from yesterday stood behind her, gripping her neck with one hand and raising the other to strike her again. Stop. Right. Now. A roar ripped from Luffy's throat as Conqueror's haki exploded from his body, his full killing intent aimed directly at the bandit leader. The man's eyes rolled back as dizziness overtook him. Staggering, he released Makino's neck. Luffy dashed forward and caught her just before she hit the ground. Her bloodied face, limp body, she'd already passed out. Luffy's eyes turned blood red. His pupils shrank into murderous slits. All he wanted now was to kill. He gently laid Makino down on the ground. Then, with one hand, he grabbed a barrel of wine and smashed it against the bandit leader's skull. The impact sent the man crashing to the ground. Wine soaked the dirt, and the cold splash jolted the bandit back to consciousness. But when he looked up, all he saw were Luffy's eyes, burning with a beast-like rage, like lightning ready to tear the heavens apart. Before he could speak, Luffy drew the man's own curved blade from his waist. In a single motion, he plunged it straight into the bandit's heart. Then he turned toward the rest of them. A blur. And suddenly, a severed head hit the ground. Moments later, Luffy stood amidst a field of corpses, 20-something lifeless bodies. Blood trickled down his face, dripped off his chin, and splashed silently onto the ground. A few days passed. Makino's injuries had gradually healed, and thanks to timely treatment, the wounded villager's life was saved as well. However, with no one to manage it, the bar was forced to close temporarily. Luffy didn't sit idle during these days. He wandered around the outskirts of Fuchsia village and wiped out 2 more small-time bandit gangs, less than 30 people combined. Only then did the rage in his heart begin to ease, if only slightly. Yet every time he saw Makino's bruised and battered face in his mind, he wished he could drag that bandit leader up from hell and kill him 100 more times. Makino had been the one who cared for him the most since he came to this world. For 2 years, while Luffy focused solely on leveling up, it was Makino who provided him with food, shelter, and daily necessities. Despite her young age, she cared for him with the patience and warmth of a mother. Just as Luffy was planning to head out again and hunt more bandits, someone showed up, and saved the remaining ones near Fuchsia village from certain doom. That morning, the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky a pale silver. The deep blue veil of night faded, and the empty harbor welcomed an enormous figure. The marine flag fluttered in the wind, like a mighty seagull spreading its wings. A marine warship slowly docked at Fuchsia village's small port. But surprisingly, only a single figure emerged from the massive ship. It was none other than the marine's legendary hero, Monkey D. Garp. He wore a pristine white marine uniform, and the word, "Justice," on his cape danced in the breeze. His piercing blue eyes contrasted with the long scar under his left one. His hair was short and graying, and his massive, mountain-like body rippled with dense, powerful muscle. Each muscle was sharp and defined, like those of a rampaging lion. And yet this terrifying figure strolled down the ship's ramp with one hand casually picking his nose and the other stuffed into his pocket. "Why's the town so dead today?" Garp muttered. Seeing no one around, he wiped his finger on his coat and sighed. "Forget it. Guess I'll go check on my adorable grandson." With that, he marched off toward the village elder's house with exaggerated, heavy strides. "Grandpa." Just returning from a hunt, Luffy caught sight of the relaxed Garp and shouted excitedly. Hearing the long-missed voice of his grandson calling out, "Grandpa," Garp's lips curled into a wide grin as he turned toward the sound. "Aw, Luffy, puh." Garp froze in place like a thunderstruck tree stump. There stood his grandson, barely up to his waist, carrying a wild boar the size of a small mountain on his shoulders, bouncing happily toward him. Garp stood rooted in shock until Luffy reached him, grinning. "Grandpa, you're back." Thud. Luffy dropped the beast to the ground, kicking up a thick cloud of dust. "Ran into a big guy today," he laughed. "Perfect for a feast." Garp stared at the boar, noting the huge dent in its skull, then down at Luffy's tiny fist. He'd always known their family genes were ridiculous, but this, even he had to admit, it was terrifying. Of course, Garp wasn't the type to be afraid. Not in the slightest. Instead, he lovingly ruffled Luffy's hair and burst out laughing. "Wahahaha. My grandson is amazing. Luffy, you really are my grandson. Perfect timing, come back with me this time and join the new recruit training. That old geezer Zephyr is always bragging about his lousy students. Go show his brats what a real student looks like." Garp's muscle-packed brain was firing on all cylinders now, not caring in the least what others thought as he rambled on excitedly. He didn't even wait for a reply, just tucked Luffy under one arm, grabbed the boar with the other, and said, "Let's go greet the village chief first." At the village elder's home, a steaming cup of tea was handed to Garp. The old village chief leaned on his cane and asked curiously, "Done with your duties at the marine? What brings you back here?" Garp took a big sip and replied casually, "Not even close. The seas are a mess right now. There's this new guy, Shanks, some big-name pirate stirring up trouble with Whitebeard." "Then why are you here?" "Well, some idiot celestial dragons planning to come visit. The government wants Marines to secure the area in advance. And you volunteered." "Nah. Sengoku was about to send a vice admiral, so I just left him a note and sailed off myself." Wahahaha. Garp smacked the table laughing, clearly amused by the image of Sengoku's face when he found the note. After calming down, Garp added sincerely, "By the way, thank you for taking care of Luffy all this time, Chief. I plan to take him back with me now. With proper training, he'll be a famous Marine in no time." "I'm not going." Luffy, who had been quietly listening all along, suddenly interrupted with a loud refusal. It wasn't that he particularly wanted to be a pirate, but it was obvious that pirates lived more freely. Besides, he had plans for the future, big ones. Plans that wouldn't work if he were stuck serving the Marines. "Stupid grandpa. I don't want to be a Marine. I'm gonna be the Pirate King." Bam! A familiar fist of love came crashing down on his head. "You little brat. Talking nonsense again. You and Ace are both going to become the strongest Marines." Furious, Garp grabbed Luffy by the cheeks and dragged him outside. Before leaving, he turned back and said, "Chief, I'll be putting Luffy somewhere else for now. Please let Makino know." "Oh okay." The elder was stunned. He hadn't expected Luffy's dream to be becoming a pirate. Struggling in vain, Luffy mumbled with his squished mouth, "Grandpa Chief. Give that big boar to Makino-san. Make sure she eats well and gets better. I'll come visit her." "Fine. Once you become a Marine, I'll let you come back anytime." With a grunt, Garp tightened his grip and added, "I'll check on Makino myself later. I've got some Marine-grade medicine on the ship." "Ow ow ow. Grandpa. Let go." Even without the Gomu Gomu no Mi, Luffy's face was being stretched like rubber. "Shut it." Garp growled. "Leaving you in this half-assed Fuchsia village was a mistake." And so, with Luffy squashed in his iron grip, the two bickered their way across several hours of walking. They finally reached a small wooden cabin deep in the forest on the far side of the island. Knock knock knock. Garp pounded on the door impatiently and shouted, "Open up, Dayton." A moment later, the door creaked open. A huge, round woman with wild orange hair and a cigarette dangling from her lips stared blankly at the scene. Behind her stood a gang of scruffy-looking thugs. Her eyes darted from Garp to the boy in his arms, and her expression instantly changed. "Pete, please, Vice Admiral Garp. Have mercy. Raising Ace was already hard enough, he's 10 now and totally unmanageable. Just take him back already." Garp ignored her entirely, picked Luffy up with one hand, and declared, "This is my grandson. Starting today, he's your responsibility too. EHH. EHHHH. The bandits cried out in alarm. Another one. Garp's grandson this time. No way. Absolutely not. Dayton shook her head so violently her fat wobbled like jelly. All right then, Garp said casually, you choose, raise the boy, or spend the rest of your life in prison. Tui. The moment Garp set him down, Luffy felt a sudden wave of hostility behind him and instinctively leapt out of the way. A wad of spit landed right where he had been standing. If he hadn't reacted in time, well, the result would have been gross beyond words. Phew. That was close. Luffy wiped the cold sweat from his brow. Just imagining being hit by that made his skin crawl. He looked up to see a young boy sitting atop the corpse of a wild bull, glaring at him. The boy had sharp, dark phoenix eyes and unruly black hair. He was shirtless, wearing only a pair of black shorts and canvas shoes, a slender iron pipe in hand. His lean frame was deceptively muscular, his features sharp and handsome. A thick bandage was stuck across his forehead, and his entire expression radiated a deep resentment, as if the world owed him a great debt. Hey, what the hell's your problem? Even though Luffy had once cried through 2 whole rolls of tissue over Ace's death, he couldn't just stand there and let him spit at him like that. TCH. Ace, a bit surprised by Luffy's quick reaction, merely clicked his tongue. With his usual cold arrogance, he didn't bother responding, he rarely spoke to anyone aside from Sabo anyway. Hearing the commotion, Dayton and Garp turned their heads. Oh hey, you're back, Ace, Garp greeted casually, as if seeing an old friend. He then gave Luffy a hearty smack on the head and added, that's Ace. He's 3 years older than you. Starting today, you'll be living together, so try to get along. Dayton, flustered, asked, wait, what? Since when was that decided? Garp raised his fist, veins bulging. You got a problem with that? Nope. Mount Kalubo, Dayton's house. After Garp left, everyone gathered around a pot of stew. Inside simmered meat from the wild bull Ace had just hunted. I hate bandits, Luffy said coldly, staring into the pot. He knew it wasn't fair to lump Dayton's group in with the rest, especially since she genuinely took care of him and Ace in the original timeline. Probably just lingering subconscious hatred from all the bandits I've been killing lately, Luffy reasoned to himself. Dayton's face darkened, and with a snap, she broke her chopsticks in half. She stood up furiously and shouted, you little brat. Shut your damn mouth. You think we wanted to take in some snot-nosed kid like you? The nearby bandits rushed to hold her back, worried she might punch Luffy, though frankly, no one was sure who'd win. Ace didn't say a word. He just kept eating. Luffy glanced between Dayton's furious face and Ace's indifference, then stood up and announced, I'm tired. I'm going to rest. Without waiting for a response, he walked into the house. Hey, it's still broad daylight, Dayton shouted after him. Luffy found a room that looked like a bedroom, shut the door, and flopped onto the bed, ignoring her yelling outside. I'll bring Zoro over once Grandpa leaves, Luffy thought, drifting off. To his own surprise, he was asleep in less than a minute. Nightfall. Dayton and her crew had all gone to bed. Ace returned home, exhausted, and collapsed onto his futon, only to suddenly roll sideways, eyes wide with alert. Damn, that was sharp. Luffy emerged from the shadows of the room, wearing a faint smirk. What do you want? Ace asked coldly, still on guard. He had sensed a flicker of presence in the corner where there had been nothing before, a presence that quickly vanished. He could tell Luffy had released it on purpose. Luffy grinned wide, baring his teeth. Haha, relax. I just wanted to be friends. I forgive you for spitting on me earlier. He even extended a hand. Childish. Seeing Luffy meant no harm, Ace lost interest. Even if Luffy could hide his presence, what did that have to do with him? He had bigger things to worry about. When Ace didn't react, Luffy just laughed, retracted his hand, and walked off alone into the mountains to hunt some late-night game. Stars twinkled and faded in waves, disappearing from the cloud-streaked sky, leaving only the pale crescent moon. At the horizon, a hint of light bloomed, as if someone had brushed the sky with pink beneath layers of golden radiance. Days passed. Luffy followed the same routine as Ace, hunting wild beasts daily, while Dayton handled the cooking. One day, Luffy figured Garp had probably left Fuchsia Village. With his speed, it took him less than half an hour to dash back. He was most worried about his injured sister figure, Makino. When he arrived at the bar, he was surprised to find it open for business again. The moment he walked in, he saw Makino still slightly bruised, quietly sweeping the floor. "Makino-san, let me help. You need to rest." Luffy rushed forward and snatched the broom from her hands. Makino stared at him in surprise, then let out a soft laugh. Luffy tilted his head in confusion. "You really haven't changed a bit, Luffy," she said fondly, eyes warm. Luffy looked down, sweeping as he spoke with guilt. "I'm sorry, Makino-san. I killed someone. I didn't want you to see me like that." Makino shook her head gently and said, "No, Luffy. I was wrong to try to interfere with your choices. Do what you need to do. I'll always support you." "Thank you, Makino-san. Wait here. I'll get your milk from the back." Even though Luffy was now living with Dayton, Makino still saved fresh milk for him every day, just in case he returned. Luffy stayed in Fuchsia Village for a short while longer. When he left, he had Zoro slung over his back, his travel bag in hand, and waved goodbye to Makino. Zoro has definitely grown in the past year. Even while piggybacking, his legs still dragged slightly on the ground. Thankfully, Luffy had prepared plenty of clothes back in Logia Town, enough for both of them until adulthood. The sky was bathed in a deep crimson hue, casting the forest in fiery red like autumn leaves. Behind them, the sun dipped low over the horizon, leaving only the last golden glimmers of dusk. Twilight, with its gentle steps, quietly crept over the mountains and out of the sky's edge. After bringing Zoro back to Dayton's house, Luffy found a random spot to settle him down and gave Dayton a quick rundown of the situation. Over the past few days, his relationship with Dayton and the others had improved a lot. After all, Luffy wasn't exactly a problem child, at least not one who ignored reason. Still, seeing yet another kid in her house, Dayton frowned so hard it looked like she could squash a fly between her eyebrows. It was a clear, sunny day. Ace, as usual, woke up early and headed off to his secret base to meet Sabo. "Hey, where are you going?" Luffy, who had been waiting by the door, stepped forward as he saw Ace silently walking into the woods. Ace glanced at him coldly but didn't answer. When Luffy tried to follow, Ace suddenly turned and kicked down a thick tree. The massive trunk crashed between them, its thick foliage forming a natural barrier. Luffy could only shake his head with a helpless smile. "Looks like it won't be that easy, huh?" After crossing the northern side of Mt. Kalubo, a desolate zone came into view. It was a place where all abandoned things were dumped, whether objects or people. Lawless and unregulated, it had no doctors, no justice. Crime and disease festered here. The air was always filled with a foul stench. Towering heaps of garbage rotted under the sun, with smog and smoke curling into the sky. This place was known as the Gray Terminal. Ace wove through the trash heaps and ran deep into the forest on the other side. "Sabo, Sabo, are you here?" He cupped his hands around his mouth and called out loudly. Perched lazily on a tree branch nearby was a boy. "Oh, took you long enough, Ace." With a cocky grin, the boy looked down from the tree. He wore a tall top hat, a blue British-style dress suit, and expensive high-top leather shoes, though the dirt and grime on him, along with the iron pipe in his hand, made it clear he was no ordinary noble. "Sorry I'm late," Ace said flatly, not sounding the least bit sorry. "You were late. I already pulled a job in town while I was waiting." Ace smirked. "Is that so? Actually, I did too." Deep in the Gray Terminal's forest stood an enormous tree, so tall and dense it blocked out the sky. Ace and Sabo sat on a thick branch, nestled in a fork of the great tree. The bark had been sawed open to form a large square opening, and the heartwood inside had been hollowed out. Sabo was counting their loot while Ace watched in silence. "Whoa, that's awesome. You've got more than me," Sabo exclaimed as he sorted the money. "Where'd you get all that?" "Snatched it off a bunch of thugs at the town gates," Ace said proudly. "Man, I lost again today," Sabo muttered, frustrated. "Doesn't matter who wins. It's all for our future pirate fund. We've been saving for 5 years now, it's been tough." Sabo looked longingly at the hidden treasure inside their secret base, glimmering gold coins, dazzling gems, and thick stacks of cash. "I wonder how long it'll take before we can afford a pirate ship." Ace leaned back and said dreamily, "No idea, maybe tens of millions, or even 100 million. We're still a long way off." Seeing Sabo still staring at their treasure, Ace suddenly grew cautious. "Better cover it up. If someone finds this, we're screwed." "Right." Sabo quickly grabbed the piece of bark to hide the stash. Then, a voice. "You guys wanna be pirates too?" It hit like a thunderclap. Ace and Sabo's heads snapped toward the sound. Sitting casually on a nearby branch, smiling as if nothing had happened, was Luffy. His bright eyes sparkled, like sunlight breaking through the clouds, utterly unaware that he'd just discovered their biggest secret. The leaves above swayed gently, not from wind, but as if light itself had brushed across them. Ace's face turned serious. "How did you find this place?" "I followed you, of course," Luffy replied with a carefree grin. "Damn it." Ace clenched his jaw in frustration. "Who is he?" Sabo asked anxiously. "He's the kid I told you about, the one staying with me at Dayton's." Ace answered, a hint of regret in his voice. "I told you to stay here instead of climbing back and forth through the mountains for training," Sabo said. Then, glancing back at Luffy, he added grimly. "He knows our secret. If we let him go, he'll blab for sure." "Let's take him out," Ace said bluntly. "Yeah, let's do it." Both boys grabbed their iron pipes and slowly advanced toward Luffy, who continued smiling without saying a word. "Come on, Sabo, hit him," Ace called out nervously when they got closer. "What are you talking about?" "You hit him," Sabo retorted, stunned. "I've never killed anyone. I don't even know how." "Me neither." PFF'd, "Ha ha ha ha. You guys are hilarious." Luffy burst out laughing as the two began bickering. "Shut up," Ace and Sabo yelled in unison. "Hey, let's be friends," Luffy said, ignoring their shouting. "I'm Luffy, captain of a pirate crew." "See, captain of a pirate crew." Ace and Sabo's eyes lit up instantly, full of admiration, tiny stars practically sparkling in their gaze. "Wait a minute, no way." Ace suddenly snapped out of it. "You live at Dayton's just like me. How can you be a pirate already?" Luffy grinned confidently. "Because I'm strong enough." He raised his right fist, pulled it back, and punched the air. A shockwave exploded outward, spiraling like a sea conch. The forest behind him howled, as if 1,000 wolves were howling at once. Trees bent and groaned, their branches whipping like they were trying to break free. Leaves scattered, grass flattened, and the wind howled like a beast on a rampage, ready to destroy everything in its path. Ace and Sabo stood frozen, mouths hanging open like they'd been smacked on the head with a club. Their iron pipes slipped from their hands, rolled off the branch, and fell to the forest floor. Seeing their stunned expressions, Luffy's smile widened just a bit. With a cool, serious face, he nodded inwardly to himself. Not bad at all. Totally worth using a bit of conqueror's hockey to show off. Ace stared wide-eyed at Luffy, who was chuckling with a mischievous grin. That was insane. Sabo took a step back, still in shock. They were still young, and had never seen true strength before. What Luffy had just displayed was enough to let him run rampant through the entire Goa Kingdom. In other words, Luffy already possessed the power to destroy a nation. How was that? Impressive, right? Luffy beamed proudly, a complete contrast to the overwhelming pressure he had just exuded. It was amazing, Ace couldn't believe it, this kid who lived in the same house as him, someone 3 years younger, was this powerful. Then let's be friends. Luffy reached out his hand again, offering it with a bright, spring-like smile. "Why? What's your goal in doing this?" Ace no longer believed Luffy was after their treasure. Someone that strong didn't need to steal anything. His strength was his reason. But still, Ace couldn't understand why Luffy wanted to befriend them. Goal. What goal do I need? You and I are both Grandpa's grandsons. We're brothers, right? Isn't it natural for us to get along? Luffy said it so casually, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. But that ordinary explanation hit Ace right in the heart. The word, brother, deeply shook the walls around his long-shut heart. All his life, he had only ever heard curses and hatred. But now, for the first time, he realized he had family. Do you want me to stay alive? Ace asked in a hushed, trembling voice. Of course I do, Luffy answered instantly. Ace shook his head, a little dejected. No, you don't get it. I do, Luffy said, his tone suddenly playful. Gramps already told me everything. What? Ace looked at Luffy in shock. You knew. Then why would you still? Luffy looked a little melancholic, then smiled faintly. So what? You're still Garp's grandson. You're still my brother, aren't you? You, Ace's voice caught in his throat. Sabo, meanwhile, was completely confused. What are you two even talking about? Ace, what's going on? He asked, concerned. Ace, Luffy said gently, you don't have to care what some people think. Not everyone will accept you. But that's okay. All you need to know is that someone out there needs you. I need you. Sabo needs you. Grandpa Garp needs you. Even Dayton and her gang, though they grumble all the time, they really do care about you. You're family to them. It was a strange thing to say, serious, heartfelt, and it left Ace speechless. Tears slowly welled in Ace's eyes and began falling freely. Sabo didn't know what had triggered the tears, but he knew what to do. He stepped up and wrapped an arm around Ace's shoulders. Yeah, Ace. I need you too, he said with a grin. Ace didn't know why, but the tears wouldn't stop. They poured down his cheeks like a waterfall, completely out of control. That night, the sky was pitch black, but filled with stars, like pearls scattered across a jade plate. What's going on here? Ace. Luffy. Who the hell is this kid? Why is there another brat in the house? Inside Dayton's house, she was shouting with bulging eyes, glaring at Ace and Luffy. But Sabo, unfazed, confidently stepped forward and slapped his hand into hers like a handshake. Hey, you must be Dayton. Nice to meet you, I'm Sabo. Dayton furrowed her brow, cigarette dangling from her lips, giving Sabo a troubled look. So you're the little troublemaker I've heard about. Is that so? I heard Dayton was an old hag, Sabo quipped back, grinning. You little punk. Veins popped on Dayton's forehead. And just like that, Sabo was officially part of the household. After dinner, just as they were about to rest, Ace suddenly pointed at Zoro, who was lying in the corner. Who's that? Oh, don't worry about him. He's my partner. He's currently in training and needs to sleep for 10 years. A cold sweat trickled down both Ace and Sabo's foreheads. They glanced at the sleeping Luffy, then looked at each other and had the same thought. Luffy being this strong is weird enough, but now his underling's even weirder. Maybe, being weird is the shortcut to getting strong. They locked eyes and nodded silently in agreement. The next morning, Ace and Sabo woke up early. Despite it being Sabo's first night at Dayton's, he adjusted immediately, rising naturally alongside Ace as if it were routine. Just as they reached the living room, they heard a gruff voice shout. Luffy, I brought the booze you asked for. What the hell are you planning? A tall bandit stood in the doorway, carrying a massive jug of alcohol. He looked utterly defeated inside. These days he wasn't robbing anyone, he was babysitting, doing laundry, cooking, and cleaning. And now, he was even buying liquor for kids. I'm seriously not living the mountain bandit life anymore, he muttered internally. Coming. Thanks, old man. Luffy ran over and took the jug off his hands. And no problem at all. The bandit stammered, not daring to upset Luffy. After all, the prey Luffy brought back each day was even bigger than Ace's. Watching Luffy walk away with the jug of alcohol, the bandit thought to himself, what terrifying little monsters. Deep in the valleys of Mt. Kalubo, Luffy placed the jug and 3 cups onto a stone pedestal. Ace, Sabo, you're probably wondering why I brought you out here, huh? Both looked confused. They hadn't even eaten breakfast yet. Ace, Sabo, you both want to be pirates, right? Of course, they replied without hesitation. Then how about joining my pirate crew? I'm going to become the world's strongest man. No way. They replied in perfect sync again. It's better to carve our own paths, Ace said, eyes burning with ambition. One day, Luffy, I'll surpass you. That's right, Sabo said, clenching his fists. I'll lead my own crew, explore the vast world, and write a book about everything I see. Their dreams burned bright in the morning air. So you're walking your own paths, huh? Well, I won't stop you then. Luffy thought with a quiet smile. He stepped up to the stone pedestal, uncorked the jug, and poured 3 cups. In that case, looks like we're all setting out to sea separately. Luffy raised his cup. You guys know what this is, right? This is our sake of brotherhood. Once we drink this, we're brothers. Brothers. Ace and Sabo froze, then broke into wide smiles. They stepped forward and each picked up a cup. Even if we're not on the same ship when we become pirates, we'll still be brothers. Luffy said. No matter where we go or what we do, that bond can never be broken. Ace followed. Sabo lifted his cup. Then from today on, we're brothers. Cheers. 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 The Gray Terminal, also known as the Trash Heap. At the northern edge of this garbage mountain stood a small town, separated by thick, towering walls. The only way in or out was through the city gate, known simply as the main gate. Twice a day, the Goa Kingdom dumped massive amounts of trash here. The people who lived in the Gray Terminal scoured the heaps for food and usable goods. They'd sometimes sell what they salvaged in the town, but never begged to live there. After all, no one wanted to live like that, trapped between disgust and indifference. Beyond the gate stretched a broad road where passers-by could be clearly seen. This led to the Edge Town, a district with a faint stench lingering in the air. It was home to shady characters, outlaws, and thugs. Farther in was the pristine central street, clean, orderly, polished. And at its heart, a towering wall loomed again. Behind that wall lay the High Town, the exclusive residence of the kingdom's royals and nobles. The Goa Kingdom was known as the cleanest country in the East Blue. Spotless, unblemished, pristine. Why? Because anything unwanted was thoroughly expelled. It was the model of a perfectly segregated society. The gates between Gray Terminal and Edge Town were guarded daily by rotating squads of royal soldiers. Today was no different. You hear me? After sunset, the trash hunters will sweep the town. Watch yourselves if you value your lives. A guard barked the warning at the long line of scavengers waiting at the gate. Catch them. A commotion broke out in one of the town's diners. Clattering and crashing sounds rang out. Catch them, shouted a balding, middle-aged man in an apron, banging a ladle against the ground as he stormed out onto the street. Bystanders stopped to stare as 3 young figures dashed away, laughing. Thanks for the meal. The trio, Luffy, Ace, and Sabo, shouted over their shoulders as they ran gleefully out of town. Damn brats. Don't ever come back, the exhausted restaurant owner shouted after them, stomping his feet in frustration. Just as he was catching his breath, the local peacekeeper waddled over, sweat dripping from his jiggling body. You let them in. You know they're repeat offenders. Poor owner. Not only did he lose 26 bowls of ramen and a shattered window, but he now had to endure a lecture too. Ahahaha. The 3 boys laughed as they ran full speed toward the gate, paying no mind to the startled pedestrians in their path. Up ahead, a slightly chubby man in noble finery was strolling down the road. Hearing their laughter, he twitched. There was something oddly familiar about that voice. As the 3 darted past, his face suddenly twisted in shock. Sabo. Is that you, Sabo? Stop right there. You're alive. Come home, now. Sabo froze for a moment, but didn't stop running. His expression darkened. Hey, Sabo. That guy's calling your name. Ace asked, puzzled. Probably mistaken identity, Sabo said flatly, waving it off. Let's just go. Luffy, who knew the truth, said nothing. Back in the restaurant, the owner grumbled to the waitress. We lost 26 bowls and a pane of glass. She blinked in surprise. Can't believe they jumped out the window. And this is the 4th floor. The trio ran all the way back to their secret base. After catching their breath, Ace stood and looked directly at Sabo. Sabo, who was that guy? Why did he know your name? Are you hiding something? Sabo's mood dropped. What? What could I be hiding? Don't lie. Just tell us already, Sabo. Yeah, Luffy added, what's the point of secrets between us? Sabo stood there, dazed for a moment, then sighed and began to speak. Actually, I'm not an orphan. I wasn't born or raised in the trash heap. I have parents. That man who called out to me, he's my father. His voice grew heavier with each word. Finally, he lowered his head. I'm sorry. I lied to you. Luffy grinned. It's fine. You apologized, right? I forgive you. Ace turned away, loudly grumbling. Man, that caught me off guard. If you're some noble's kid, why run away and live in the dump? Sabo went quiet, lost in painful memories. He didn't answer. Trying to shift the mood, Luffy jumped in. All right, Ace, everyone has things they don't want to talk about. But seriously, Sabo, you're the weakest of us. Sabo blinked in confusion. Huh? Luffy turned to Ace. Hey, you don't mind if I tell him about you, right? Ace tensed slightly, gripping the metal pipe in his hand. But then he relaxed. It's fine. Luffy looked at Sabo and smiled. Sabo, since you told us your secret, we'll share ours too. Portgas D. Ace, son of the Pirate King, Gal D. Roger. Monkey D. Luffy, grandson of the Marine hero, Monkey D. Garp, and son of the Revolutionary Army's leader, Monkey D. Dragon. Silence. Sabo's jaw dropped so hard it practically hit the floor. Luffy gave a helpless shrug and glanced at Ace, who had the exact same expression as Sabo. Wait, Luffy, you're Dragon's son. Even Ace couldn't contain his shock. Even though he wasn't one to follow the news, he knew Dragon was the world government's worst nightmare. Sabo just stood there, stunned into silence. Luffy casually patted Sabo on the shoulder. That's why I said you're the weakest one. You should leave the group. You're just some normal noble's kid. Ahahahaha. He burst out laughing, completely ignoring the stunned looks from the other two. You guys are way too incredible, Sabo muttered, still dazed. But Luffy's playful teasing helped lift the weight in his chest. He actually felt a little better. Ace, on the other hand, seemed a bit melancholic. His past had been dredged up. Come on, Ace. Luffy placed a hand on his shoulder again, this time speaking seriously to both of them. Our parents. They don't define us. We were born into this world, so this world belongs to us. There's something I never told you, Ace. Once, some of Roger's old crew came to me. They wanted you to inherit Roger's will. But I said no, because we're not someone else's legacy. We're ourselves. We fight for our own sake. And someday, I want the three of us to become legends. I want us to be the kind of people whose footsteps alone shake the entire world. Time slipped by like a white horse leaping a gap. Months passed in the blink of an eye. On the surface nothing much changed. Every morning the three boys trained deep in the forest, rummaged through Grey Terminal for anything useful, and occasionally dashed into town for yet another, free, meal. Only Luffy knew what really shifted. Long after midnight, when everyone else slept, Ace and Sabo would rise silently and vanish into the darkness to push their bodies even further. Luffy merely smiled and pretended not to notice. Trash Mountain trouble. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Deep inside Grey Terminal, a swarthy, bull-necked thug suddenly lunged from the junk piles and wrapped a beefy arm around Sabo's throat. Ace leapt forward, but half a dozen men in gas masks leveled rifles at him. The gunmen opened ranks and a rotund, silk-clad noble stepped through Sabo's father. What do you mean what? The man sneered, jabbing a jeweled finger at Luffy and Ace. Sabo is my son, of course he obeys his father. You riffraff dared lure him away. Ace's fury ignited. He drove a fist at the noble, but another pirate captain caught Ace's punch, cocking his free hand to strike. A chill pricked the pirate's spine. Some primal instinct warned, if I throw this punch, I die. Luffy's voice was low and flat. I'd let go if I were you. For an instant Luffy hesitated. Should he even save Sabo? If Sabo returned home now, he might still meet Dragon one day and become the revolutionary he was meant to be. No. Luffy caught himself. Since when did I start hesitating just to keep a plot intact? If I have strength, it's to protect my brothers. A red glint flickered at his fingertips. Splurt. The pirate's throat opened in a neat red smile. He staggered back, clutching his neck as blood fountained sky high, spattering everyone present. Sabo's father blanched, scampering behind the soldiers. Kill him. I paid you, didn't I? Kill him now. None of the hired cutthroats moved. They'd just watched the second strongest man among them die in a heartbeat. Money wasn't worth that. Luffy walked forward, haki leaking like a tightening vice. Soldiers melted aside, terrified to meet his eyes. "Sabo is my brother. I won't meddle with his choices," Luffy said, voice soft as steel. "But if anyone forces him, I'll step in." Pressure piled atop the noble's shoulders, his legs trembled, heart hammering like a caged bird. Luffy advanced, each footfall a drum of doom. The man's noble dignity crumbled, replaced by naked terror. Then, "Luffy." Sabo's clear voice cut through the tension. "I've decided. I'll go home with him." Luffy halted, surprise flickering across his face. The haki died away. Ace spun on Sabo, eyes wide. "Are you crazy? You hate the nobility." "We're brothers, Ace." Sabo managed a smile. "Big brothers protect little brothers, not hide behind them. I'll settle this myself." Luffy grinned. "I trust you, Sabo ni." Ace clenched his jaw, then turned away without a word and headed for home. Luffy clapped Sabo's shoulder once, "Good luck," and ran after Ace, leaving behind a still quivering noble, cowering pirates, and pools of blood. Ace returned home with a stormy expression, radiating a stay-away aura, and walked straight into the house without a word. Curious and concerned, Dayton and the mountain bandits dared not provoke him. Instead, they quietly pulled Luffy aside outside the house. As Ace's foster mother, Dayton couldn't hide her worry. "Luffy, what's going on with Ace? And where's Sabo? He didn't come back, did they have a fight?" The bandits gathered around Luffy, anxious for answers. It's fine, really," Luffy said, folding his hands behind his head with a carefree grin. "They're both doing great." Seeing Luffy so relaxed, Dayton and the others finally breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good to hear." Slam. The door suddenly burst open. Ace stepped out, fully geared for travel. A large pack was strapped to his back, packed with tools for surviving in the wild. "Luffy," he said seriously, "I'm heading out for a while. I might not be back for a long time. Take care of yourself, alright?" "Got it. Don't worry, good luck out there." Luffy smiled, already guessing what Ace had in mind. As Ace disappeared into the distance, Luffy watched silently, thinking. "Hurry up and grow stronger, or you really won't be able to keep up with me anymore." Lately, Luffy hadn't cared much about gaining experience points. His level requirements had risen into the tens of thousands, and wild beasts only gave a few hundred at most, not worth the grind anymore. Thankfully, thanks to stat bonuses from Zoro and Nami's passive boosts, he still gained a point or two every few days. Currently, Luffy's strength stat is approaching 450. That meant even if he did nothing else, he'd reach the threshold to awaken armament haki in about a year. He wouldn't even be 9 years old by then. Nightfall. Under his father's escort, Sabo returned to his noble family estate, a lavish mini-castle nestled on the outskirts of the city. That afternoon, Sabo had given a statement at the town guard's office, falsely claiming that Luffy and Ace had forced him into wrongdoing. He didn't want to say it, but his father insisted it would taint the family's reputation otherwise. In truth, the old Sabo would never have betrayed Luffy and Ace like that. But after what he saw today, after witnessing Luffy's overwhelming power, Sabo finally understood. Only the strong can truly be free. If he were as powerful as Luffy, no amount of family pressure or class status could ever chain him down. He recalled the day they exchanged sake and became brothers, the things Luffy had said. Before, he and Ace had dreamed of escaping the system. Now, he wanted to reshape the system. Sabo's family was one of the highest-ranked noble houses in the Goa Kingdom, eligible even to intermarry with royalty. Their family library rivaled the royal archive in size, and held countless forbidden books. There were volumes on true history, military strategy, command structure, devil fruit encyclopedias, and the mechanics of class rule, books a commoner would never see. That was one of the reasons Sabo agreed to come back. The moment they reached the front gate, Sabo's father barked. "You're filthy. You're not stepping into this house like that. Wash in the courtyard, disinfect, then bathe before going inside." Back on his own turf, the old noble's bluster returned. Sabo stopped. He slowly turned around, and an invisible pressure gathered around him, subtle but suffocating. "Don't give me orders." Slap. The elder noble froze. It was as if unseen chains had bound his limbs. A wave of terror gripped him. Looking into Sabo's eyes, he thought again of that boy from earlier that day, the one who'd nearly killed him with a glance. His knees buckled. He collapsed to the ground, eyes wide, stammering. Why yes, yes. After a quick rinse, Sabo made his way to the family's private library. Gazing at the rows upon rows of bookshelves, he started scanning carefully. He didn't have much time, he needed to leave before his engagement to the princess. No matter what, he couldn't hurt the parents who had raised him, even if they disgusted him. While flipping through a book on navigation, knock knock. Someone rapped on the door. Sabo glanced up, confused. His father wouldn't disturb him here. His mother never even entered this room. The servants had no reason to come now, either. Nice to meet you, big brother. A boy with blonde mushroom-shaped hair, about Luffy's age, stood at the doorway with an exaggerated smile. Sabo closed the book and frowned. Big brother, who are you? I'm Starry, 8 years old. Father adopted me. I've heard all about you, big bro. Sabo narrowed his eyes but said nothing, returning to his reading. Unbothered, Starry walked right in and kept talking. Everyone says you're an idiot. He. Father and mother always talk behind your back. He plopped into the chair beside Sabo and said smugly. You're lucky, though. Tomorrow's combustible trash day. If you'd stayed in Gray Terminal, you'd be dead meat. Starry leaned in closer, voice dropping low. Honestly, it'd be better for me if the real son never came home. Sabo slammed his book shut. What did you just say? He growled, glaring at Starry. He grabbed Starry's collar, voice trembling. Did you say, they're going to burn the Gray Terminal? Starry gulped and quickly nodded. Yeah, it's been decided for months now. You didn't know because you were living there, but everyone in Hightown knows. The World Government Inspection Team is touring the East Blue, and they'll arrive here soon. He grinned, expression slowly warping into something hideous. There's a celestial dragon among them. The royals want to impress them. So they're going to burn all the filth out of this kingdom. Once Gray Terminal is gone, we'll finally be spotless. What the hell are you saying? Sabo clutched Starry by the collar, gripping so tightly that the boy could barely breathe, on the verge of passing out. But Sabo showed no intention of letting go. His eyes burned with fury as he shouted. There are still so many people living there. If you burn Gray Terminal, they'll have nowhere to go. They survive because of that place. Starry's eyes rolled back. Struggling for air, he managed a faint, choking plea. Let go. Sabo, gritting his teeth, finally threw him aside. Starry gasped, sucking in air like it was the most precious thing in the world. Under Sabo's intimidating glare, he scowled and muttered. I told you already. They're going to burn away this kingdom's filth, and that includes the people. Sabo's face went pale. His body trembled. Even the people. He turned to the window, staring out at the pristine streets, the neatly trimmed greenery, the well-dressed citizens passing by. It all felt so hollow. What the hell is wrong with this world? With a click, he flung the window open and leapt out. Hey, where do you think you're going? You realize how many floors up we are? Starry shouted in disbelief. But all he could do was watch as Sabo landed effortlessly, sprinted into a side alley, and vanished like a shadow. Every move was practiced and fluid, like it was second nature. Whatever, Starry grumbled, slamming the window shut and pretending nothing had happened as he left the study. Not far from Sabo's house was the military headquarters of the Goa Kingdom. Sabo crept silently onto the roof and spotted a brightly lit meeting room. He slipped to the edge of a window, pressed himself flat against the wall, and listened in. As the deployment for tomorrow finalized, we can't afford a single mistake. Our side's ready. The question is whether the pirates can ignite the trash heap without problems. They're already spreading fuel and explosives all over the Gray Terminal. Voices overlapped one after another, and Sabo heard every word, each one like a dagger to the chest. So it's true, this insanity is actually happening. Up until now, he still held onto a sliver of hope that it was just a rumor. But now, there was no denying it. Back at home, Sabo sat in silence. He couldn't focus on reading anymore. That night passed without sleep. Deep in the southern forests of Mt. Kalubo. 998, 999, 1000. Ace stood up after finishing his push-ups. Alright, warm-up's done. Time for the real fight. He touched the wound on his chest. Though it still bled if he exerted himself too much, it no longer affected his movement. He glanced at the dense woods ahead. A flame of determination flickered in his eyes as he picked up his weapon and stepped forward without hesitation. The forest loomed tall and wild, giant trees stretching to the skies, tangled roots and thick foliage forming a vast, living labyrinth. The sun blazed red above, its heat baking the land, soaking into the air itself. Ace arrived once more at a familiar clearing, surrounded by broken trees and debris. The faint scent of blood still lingered. "Hey, big guy, I'm back," Ace shouted. Boom, boom. The earth rumbled. Heavy footsteps made the entire forest tremble. From behind the brush, two lantern-sized eyes emerged. Roar rrr. A massive white tiger, over 10 meters long, burst from the jungle. Its fangs were bigger than a human, and its tail whipped behind it like a chain. But something was off, its hind leg looked twisted, clearly injured. "You're here." Ace grinned, pulling a metal pipe from his back and gripping it tightly. The tiger growled low, wary. Ace narrowed his eyes. "What, not going to attack first today?" He charged forward, shouting at the top of his lungs. The forest exploded into chaos. Dust and debris flew. Branches shattered. The air itself seemed to vibrate. When it was over, Ace stood panting, his clothes torn to rags, bruises and cuts covering his entire body. Blood dripped from his forehead, ran down to his chest, and pooled with the older wound before falling to the dirt. The tiger wasn't much better off. Its head was covered in swollen bumps, its injured leg now completely broken. One eye was swollen shut. Ace resheathed the pipe behind his back. "That's enough for today. Go rest up, I'll be back again." With that, he leapt into the trees like a ninja, vanishing into the forest. The tiger raised its head and let out a long, sorrowful roar. As if to say, "Please, don't come back." Night fell. The stars tonight were larger and brighter than ever. They didn't twinkle, they watched, like silent eyes overseeing the chaos to come. Gray Terminal burned. "Wake up. Everyone run. The fire's coming from all sides. Forget the house. Just run. Damn it. We're trapped, we're all gonna die. No way. Head for the coast. The sea. No use. The coast is blocked too." Screams and panic echoed through the junkyard slums, but none of it slowed the fire. Flames circled Gray Terminal, trapping everyone inside. In his castle room, Sabo sat frozen, staring out the window. Tears streamed silently down his cheeks. Tears of helplessness. In the deep woods, Ace stepped out of his tent, looking north. The night sky there was too bright, red, like a wound across the heavens. High atop the tallest peak of Mt. Kalubo, Luffy grabbed a metal milk bucket and poured himself a huge mug. He drank it in silence, eyes fixed on the fire in the distance. There was something in his gaze, sympathy, maybe. Or maybe just resignation. Thousands choked on smoke. Hundreds burned alive. Just as all hope was lost, a sudden wind blasted through the flames, carving out a path. At the end of that path stood a massive ship, hidden in the inferno. On the deck stood a man wrapped in a heavy cloak. The left side of his face bore a mysterious tattoo. He stood proudly at the bow, raising a hand and calling out. "Those who are willing to fight for freedom, get on this ship." From afar, Luffy watched everything clearly. He watched his father, Monkey D. Dragon, leader of the Revolutionary Army, disappear with the ship into the horizon. Did he refuse to stop the fire to keep his identity hidden? Did he open a path to save lives out of compassion? Did he turn refugees into soldiers for the sake of revolution? Luffy shook his head and smiled bitterly. He raised his mug of milk. Gulp. Good thing, he had no interest in any of that. This was the day the celestial dragons, nobles of the world, arrived at the Goa Kingdom from the Grand Line. To welcome their grand ship, an elaborate ceremony had been prepared long in advance. At the harbor, crowds swarmed the docks. Shoulder to shoulder, people gathered from every direction. Everyone, commoner or noble, came dressed in their finest attire, lined up in perfect formation, faces brimming with anticipation and admiration. Even one of the short mountain bandits from Dayton's household stood atop a high point with a telescope, observing the lively scene below. As excitement built, a nobleman at the front of the crowd suddenly shouted, Hey, look over there. Someone's sailing out to sea. What? Hey, come back. You'll ruin the welcome ceremony for the celestial dragons. The crowd buzzed with agitation. At the front, the nobles, faces darkened as they glared at a small fishing boat sailing farther and farther away from the harbor. It's a child. Whose kid is that? An official in charge of the ceremony stomped in frustration, shouting at the onlookers with a panicked face. The vast blue sea stretched endlessly, merging with the sky on the horizon. Clear, transparent, pure, peaceful. The roaring waves and the snow-white spray they flung into the air made everything at the harbor feel small, trivial, even. Perfect weather. A great day to set sail. Sabo tied off the sail of the fishing boat and stood up, gazing across the endless ocean. A black flag fluttered at the mast, emblazoned with a white S over crossed white bones. It was unmistakably a pirate flag, yet it didn't carry a trace of menace. From the harbor, voices shouted for Sabo to turn back, begging him not to disrupt the celestial dragon's grand arrival. Sabo looked back, watching the nobles yell with twisted expressions. He recalled what had happened days before. What scares me most is being swallowed by this country and becoming a walking corpse. Sorry, Ace, Luffy, I'm not turning back. The little boat drifted further from the shore, becoming a speck of dust before the boundless sea. Then, from the side of the island, a massive warship slowly appeared. Towering dozens of meters high and stretching hundreds of meters long, its golden lion head prow glistened in the sun, unmistakably the ship of someone unimaginably powerful. The giant vessel drew closer to the harbor. The nobles of Goa burst into cheers, clapping and exclaiming in admiration. If not for noble etiquette, they might have broken into dance on the spot. All eyes blazed with fervor, watching the celestial dragons arrive. That ship, is that really the celestial dragons? If I die now, I die without regrets. Such absurd declarations filled the air. Meanwhile, Sabo's tiny boat was drifting ever closer to the celestial dragon's colossal ship. To one day command a ship like that. That'd be a dream. Better steer clear before I get crushed. Sabo chuckled, skillfully adjusting his course to avoid the behemoth. The celestial dragons, descendants of the 20 kings who founded the world government 800 years ago, reside in the holy land of Mary Geoise. They wear bubble helmets because they believe commoners aren't worthy of sharing the same air, and they treat all other races as slaves. They enjoy absolute privilege. If they are offended in any way, the Marines will dispatch an admiral and a fleet immediately to punish the offender. Over time, this unchecked power led to rampant abuse, especially on the Sabayati archipelago. They possess an extreme belief in bloodline purity, holding deep-rooted superiority and blatant discrimination toward all non-celestial dragon humans. Simply put, they don't see anyone else as human. On the deck of the great ship, one of the celestial dragons looked down with disdain at the cheering idiots on the dock. "This is the last stop, isn't it?" he asked, yawning with boredom. "Yes," Saint Jalmik, a suited man beside him replied respectfully. What's that?" Jalmik asked, squinting at something in the water. The bodyguard raised a telescope and looked. "It appears to be a fishing boat, with a child on board." "Oh, a fishing boat, and it's flying a pirate flag. Then it's a pirate. Handle it as such." With that, Saint Jalmik took a rocket launcher from a slave standing behind him. He aimed it at the small vessel. The targeting lens locked on. Boom! The missile roared through the air, leaving a fiery trail. From a nearby mountain, Luffy had been watching everything unfold. At the moment the rocket was fired, his suppressed aura surged forth. A wave of Conqueror's haki slammed into the missile. Luffy narrowed his eyes, staring at the horizon. Another wave of haki burst forth, stronger than his, colliding with the missile midair. Boom! The two forces clashed, prematurely detonating the missile in a burst of energy. The sea trembled. A massive whirlpool formed beneath the explosion. Sabo's fishing boat was shattered in the shockwave, and the boy himself was knocked unconscious. Debris sank into the sea, yet, somehow, Sabo's body did not fall into the whirlpool. A mysterious gust of wind swept him gently away, deeper into the ocean's embrace. Luffy's pupils shrank. Focusing his superhuman eyesight, he caught a glimpse of a distant ship on the horizon. Its design matched exactly the one that had rescued refugees from the blazing gray terminal. Luffy chuckled. Looks like Dad reached out to Sabo after all. With that, he retracted his haki and became an ordinary boy once more, turning back toward Dayton's house. Back at the port, chaos had erupted. Sabo. A mountain bandit stared at the sea, eyes wide and trembling. Tears streamed down his face, heartbroken. The boat was hit. God, is that kid still alive? Damn it. He pissed off the celestial dragons. On the warship's deck, Saint Jalmic laughed with glee, like a child who just broke a toy. That was actually kind of fun. Ha ha ha. The black-suited bodyguard, however, frowned. He had sensed something off about the missile, but with his observation haki fully active, he hadn't detected anything. Still, considering the man beside him was a celestial dragon, he brushed aside his doubts. The sea calmed. The warship docked. When the nobles saw that the celestial dragons weren't angry, in fact, even seemed amused, they let out a collective sigh of relief. The welcome ceremony proceeded as planned. A red carpet stretched from the harbor to the royal palace, with citizens and nobles kneeling on either side. At that moment, throughout the entire Goa kingdom, the only sound was the footsteps of the celestial dragons. Even the king knelt at the end of the red carpet, bowing low to greet their arrival. Luffy walked leisurely along the shore, heading back home. As he neared Dayton's house, he saw a crowd gathered outside the front door. What did you just say? Ace had just returned from the mountains. His eyes were burning with fury, fists clenched tight, and he roared at the short mountain bandit Dogra, who had also just come back. Dayton and the other mountain bandits stared at Dogra in shock and disbelief. Dogra hung his head low, silent and stricken with grief. Liar. You're lying. There's no way Sabo is dead. Ace grew more agitated by the second. He couldn't believe it. He refused to believe it. In his rage, he swung a fist at Dogra, whose words he saw as nothing more than nonsense. Smack. Ace, calm down. Luffy caught his fist mid-swing. Sabo was hit by the cannon. Ace froze, staring at Luffy with trembling eyes that quickly welled up with tears. No way, Luffy, it's not true, right? This has to be a dream, right? He grabbed Luffy's shoulders and shook him, his eyes red and swollen from crying. Tell me it's not true. Tell me it's not real, Luffy. Calm down and listen to me. Luffy struggled under Ace's grip, finally shaking him off before saying firmly. Yes, Sabo was hit, but he's not dead. Ace stopped. The tears kept falling, but he went still, dazed and slowly regaining control. Luffy looked around at Ace, and at Dayton and the others, and said clearly. Sabo wasn't hit directly by the cannon. He's alive. Really? That's great. Ace dropped to his knees, shoulders slumping as he slowly sat on the ground. Ace, there's something else I need to tell you, Luffy said once Ace had calmed down. I'm leaving soon. This place can't help me anymore. I've decided to head out to sea, to get stronger. Ace stayed quiet, head still bowed. But inside, his emotions churned in turmoil. Why? Why am I so weak? Why? He didn't know what to do. He wasn't strong enough to be acknowledged. He wasn't strong enough to stop Sabo from being taken. When he thought Sabo had died, he didn't know how to respond, so he lashed out at his own people. Seeing the confusion and sorrow in Ace's expression, Luffy crouched beside him and put a hand on his shoulder. Ace, we're still kids. We don't have the power to change the world yet. I have my opportunity, you'll have yours too. Just, not yet. Sabo's not dead, but he won't be back for a while. That's his opportunity. I'll be gone for a long time, but I will come back for your departure ceremony. So don't be sad. If you don't know what to do, then just keep surpassing yourself. That's the best thing you can do. The day all three of us make our names known on this sea, will be the day we reunite. That night, surprisingly, Dayton prepared a feast, one of the best they'd ever had. She even brought out a bottle of fine wine she had stashed away for years. It was a farewell party for Sabo. Even though he wasn't there, everyone present wholeheartedly wished him a better future. The next day, Ace left again without a word. Luffy entrusted Zoro to the Dayton family, asking them to let Zoro wait there if he woke up early. Afterward, Luffy made his rounds in Fuchsia village, saying goodbye to Makino, the village chief, and the others. This time, he would be gone for a long time. A few days later, a mountain bandit came running back in a hurry and said, Luffy, It's confirmed, the patrol ship leaves tomorrow morning. A silver gleam flashed in Luffy's eyes. Tomorrow, huh, got it. He packed a few larger clothes and slipped away from the Dayton household without a word. Under the cover of night, he made his way to the port. Using his small frame and stealth, he evaded the guards and snuck aboard the Celestial Dragon's massive ship. He quickly found a storage room, and hid. At dawn, Goa Kingdom's harbor bustled with noise again. Dance troops, marching bands, honor guards, everyone scrambled to send off the world nobles with flair. The nobles of Goa gathered as well, all hoping to catch one last glimpse of the sacred celestial dragons. Fireworks exploded in the sky. Rose petals floated down from above. The whole harbor was ablaze with celebration. Saint Jalmic boarded the great ship with a blank expression. He didn't spare even a glance for the king, who knelt behind him. He brought along a few newly captured slaves, ready to return to the holy land of Mary Geoise. As the ship slowly departed the kingdom, Luffy remained hidden, perfectly still. Days passed. Then, one day, Luffy heard voices outside the storage room. Finally, we're out of the calm belt. Yeah, these past few days, Lord Jalmic's been fishing with slaves to attract sea kings. Looks like they're all dead now. Not just that. Yesterday, when there were no slaves left, he threw Tony overboard just to keep playing. Good thing we're out now. Otherwise, we'd be next, haha. Serves him right. Last time, he killed that slave girl we were all supposed to take turns with. The voices grew distant and finally faded. So, we've passed through the calm belt, huh? Luffy, hidden all this time, began to move. There are only two ways to enter the Grand Line from the four seas. One is through the Red Line, but the entrance is unpredictable and requires expert navigation and a fair bit of luck. The other is via the Calm Belt, a sea region controlled by the world government. But the Calm Belt is infested with massive sea kings, lethal to most ships. The government, however, has a solution: sea stone lined on the ship's hull. Sea stone mimics the energy of the sea, rendering devil fruit users powerless while also masking the ship from Sea King's senses. That's how marine and government ships travel freely through the Calm Belt and enter the Grand Line. Time to begin. Luffy grinned with excitement. Bored at sea, Saint Jalmic sat in his room, growing tired of fishing and unsure of what to do next. Outside his cabin, the strongest black-suited bodyguard stood at attention. Suddenly, his nose twitched, his expression changed instantly. He rushed from the Celestial Dragon's private quarters. Ah! The moment he opened the door, he saw a fellow black-clad guard lying at his feet, clutching his throat, dead. The deck was soaked with blood and littered with corpses. The Celestial Dragon's cabin had been specially reinforced to block out all sound. If not for the overwhelming stench of blood that leaked in through the cracks, the bodyguard wouldn't have noticed a thing. "Oh, you found me already," Luffy said cheerfully. No wonder he was happy. After sneaking out of the storage room, Luffy had first infiltrated the sailors' quarters, ensuring all the resting crew would never wake again. Then he systematically hunted down the conscious ones, slaughtering them one by one. The black suits finally noticed, but they were no match for him. Even the few strong ones were overwhelmed by Luffy's relentless blows. After nearly wiping out the entire crew, Luffy's long stagnant level finally rose. He poured all his stat points into strength. Then came the moment he'd been waiting for. Ding! Congratulations, host. Strength and stamina requirements met. Armament Haki awakened. Armament Haki consumes a small amount of stamina to concentrate blood force onto the surface of the body or weapon, forming black hardened matter. Increases attack equals strength 2 and defense equals stamina 2. With Armament Haki active, Luffy tore through his enemies with even greater ease. He had planned to leave the strongest one for last, but it turned out that one had come to him. The black-suited guard eyed Luffy warily, sensing something ominous. "Who are you? Don't you realize this is a Celestial Dragon's ship?" "Oh, you don't need to know that." Without another word, Luffy lunged, armament-coated fist striking first. Clang! A sound like metal rang out. The bodyguard had also used Armament Haki to block. Bang! 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 Fist met fist, hundreds of times in seconds. Both fighters eventually stepped back, evenly matched. Teen ripped to shreds by their overwhelming power. Under the moonlight, waves crashed against the ruined vessel. Luffy was slightly surprised. After killing so many guards, he had assumed there was no one truly strong on board. Looks like this one might actually be tough. Though Luffy had just awakened his haki, he wasn't arrogant enough to believe he had more experience than his opponent. Still, from their brief exchange, he sensed the man's attack power wasn't much higher than his. Thoughts flashed through Luffy's mind, then he attacked again, this time aiming straight for the man's head. The black suit crossed his arms and blocked, stepping back. Luffy, airborne, was momentarily stalled. The man seized his chance, ramming a knee into Luffy's stomach. Over 1000 HP gone in an instant. But Luffy didn't flinch from the pain. He clung to the man's leg and dropped down, avoiding being kicked away. Their eyes met. Luffy's gaze sharpened. Conqueror's haki erupted, full force, aimed directly at the man. The world fell silent. The black suit staggered, his mind briefly blacking out. Luffy took the chance, no fancy moves, just one solid punch. Straight to the groin. The guard's eyes rolled back. Out cold. Luffy didn't hesitate. While his foe lay helpless, he struck again, this time at the throat. Crack. The man's body was sent flying, crashing into the ship's wall. Sea Conqueror's haki, he spat blood and died. Ding. Host has slain a celestial dragon's bodyguard. 10,500 express, 8,000 gold. Ding. Level up. Current level, 22. Ding. Strength and agility requirements met. Observation haki unlocked. Observation haki. Greatly enhances perception of nearby presences. Sense enemies beyond sight, or anticipate their movements. Detection radius. Stamina 10 meters. Detection strength scales with agility. Ha 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 ha. Under the pale moonlight, Luffy stood on the deck, laughing wildly. Where the hell is everyone? Someone bring me food, shouted Saint Jalmic as he stepped out of his cabin. A few days later, the world was shaken by a headline from the news coup. Celestial Dragon Saint Jalmic slain by unknown pirate. The world of One Piece is divided into 6 parts: the Grand Line, the Red Line, and the 4 Seas, East Blue, West Blue, North Blue, and South Blue. The Grand Line and the Red Line intersect perpendicularly and wrap around the entire planet, segmenting the seas into the 4 distinct regions. Bordering the Grand Line on both sides are the calm belts, zones of ocean where no winds blow and where massive sea kings dwell. These belts isolate the Grand Line from the 4 seas. There are 2 known intersections between the Red Line and the Grand Line. One is Reverse Mountain, and the other is the Holy Land of the Celestial Dragons, Mary Geois. Reverse Mountain is a mysterious and dangerous entry point to the Grand Line. It has 5 water channels flowing along it. 4 of them, defying gravity, flow upward toward the mountain's peak. These 4 routes connect to the east, west, north, and south blue respectively. At the summit, these waters converge and flow down the 5th channel, into the Grand Line. This means entry into the Grand Line is only possible through this outflow, which becomes the official starting point of the route. The Grand Line is no ordinary sea. Its first half is known as Paradise, while the second half is called the New World. The New World is especially chaotic. Magnetic fields, weather, ocean currents, and wind patterns all behave unpredictably. Navigating it is nearly impossible using traditional methods. Even knowing your exact location is a challenge. Only 2 tools can be trusted: the log pose and the eternal pose. The log pose captures the magnetic field of the island you're on and, once it stabilizes, which takes anywhere from a few hours to a few months, it points you to the next island. The eternal pose is a permanent version of the log pose. It is set to always point to a specific island. From Reverse Mountain, 7 magnetic routes branch outward. While one may freely choose any of the routes at the start, once a route is chosen, it cannot be changed. These paths must be followed island by island, until eventually all 7 merge into a single route leading to the Grand Line's final island, Raftel. However, some small islands do not lie on any magnetic route. Because log poses do not point to these off-route islands, few pirates or merchant ships ever pass by them. One such country lies in the first half of the Grand Line, a small, peaceful alliance of villages known as Redley. Though they called themselves a nation, Redley was really just a handful of towns that cooperated and held meetings between village chiefs when problems arose. Thanks to the island's pleasant climate, its self-sufficient people lived peacefully and happily, until 2 months ago, when a nightmare descended. That day, like many before it, a gentle breeze drifted over the island, where spring ruled all year round. Riding that breeze came a tiny boat drifting across the sea, carrying an unconscious passenger. It was far too small for ocean travel, no one would be foolish enough to sail the Grand Line in such a vessel. The kind villagers immediately recognized it as a refugee boat. What a poor soul, they murmured among themselves. Several strong swimmers plunged into the sea, hauling the boat to shore before the waves could carry it away again. Others helped bring the injured man ashore to find medical help. The man was large and burly, but his body was a mess, head soaked in blood, multiple ribs shattered. It took everything the village doctors had to stabilize him. But that was only the beginning of their nightmare. 2 months later, this forgotten island, rarely visited by ships, was once again approached, this time by a pirate vessel. Luffy stepped off the ship. He'd never imagined that killing a celestial dragon would earn him a reward of 100,000 gold coins. Overjoyed, Luffy had immediately bought 10 rapid growth capsules from the loot aboard the massive ship. The first few capsules only caused minor physical changes, mainly increasing his height, but the stat boosts were negligible. It wasn't until the 10th capsule that he noticed real improvements, each attribute increased by over 100 points. Now far more powerful, Luffy took one of the lifeboats from the Celestial Dragon's ship and left that area behind. He hadn't drifted for long before he encountered another pirate ship. At first, he only wanted a ride. After all, he had just finished a massacre and wasn't in the mood for more killing. But the pirates mistook Luffy's clean and attractive appearance as a sign of value. They planned to sell him into slavery. That left Luffy no choice. As the saying goes, heaven may forgive sins done to you, but self-inflicted sins are unforgivable. True to his belief in strength, Luffy used violence to teach them a lesson, and gave them a second chance at life. This crew wasn't weak. Their captain was a well-known pirate with a 130 million bounty, a fearsome figure in the first half of the Grand Line. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, he crossed paths with Luffy. Unable to control his strength, Luffy's final punch knocked the captain into the sea. He figured the man, being a devil fruit user, was surely dead. Yet strangely, the system never notified him of any reward. Disappointed at the lost XP and coins, Luffy took command of the ship and began aimlessly drifting. Just last week, bored out of his mind, Luffy rummaged through the captain's quarters. There, tucked in the nightstand, he discovered a piece of vivre card, life paper. This unique material, made by mixing fingernails into special pulp, is fireproof and waterproof. It represents a person's life force. People often tear off pieces to give to loved ones, and those pieces are naturally drawn to each other. With nothing better to do, Luffy adjusted the sails and followed the direction of the vivre card, curious to see what might happen. That's how he ended up on this quiet, isolated island. As he wandered in from the port, he noticed that every house had its doors shut tight. Shops were half closed and silent, the entire town seemed broken and lifeless. When he reached the town square, he finally saw people, lots of them. They were hauling stones, carrying sand, and working themselves to the bone. An old man struggled to pull a massive rock behind him. Curious, Luffy stepped forward to give him a hand and asked, "Hey Gramps, what are you guys doing?" The sudden relief startled the old man, he nearly stumbled. Turning back to respond, he barely got a word out when crack, a whip lashed across his back. "Hey, you old geezer. Who said you could stop?" A burly overseer shouted, whip in hand. He then turned to Luffy. "And you, what crew are you from? Get back to your station unless you don't want today's food." Luffy glanced at the man with the whip, then lowered his head and muttered to himself. "Looks like, I've got more work to do."